Under the blazing sun, the little frontier town sat restless, the wind carrying dust down its single street. Wooden buildings leaned tiredly, their windows rattling in the heat. The saloon doors swung often, laughter and curses spilling out, but not everyone in town found cause for celebration. Behind the general store, a family's shame was being bartered, and no one dared step close enough to stop it. Anna stood stiff, her hands clutched in front of her, her plain dress clinging in the dry air. She tried to keep her chin high, though her heart beat against her ribs like a trapped bird. Her father's voice cracked as he argued with the men across from him, rough-faced men who carried guns and knives as easily as they breathed. "You'll have it next week," he said. His words weak, his body bent with the burden of too many failed promises. The leader of the gang, broad-shouldered and scarred across one cheek, leaned close. "You had your week already." "And the one before?" "Time's run out, old man." His eyes slid toward Anna, and she felt the weight of that gaze like a rope tightening around her. Her brother shifted uneasily beside him, but he made no move to stand between Anna and the danger. His head hung low, his boots scuffing the dirt. He wouldn't even look at her. The leader smiled, thin and cold. "Your debt's worth more than coin now. We'll take the girl. Call it square." Anna's breath caught. The ground seemed to tilt, her stomach hollowing out. Her father's mouth opened, but no words came. He shut it again, the silence worse than denial. With a trembling hand, he pushed Anna forward, her legs locked. She wanted to scream, to run, but the grip of two men closed around her arms like iron shackles. Rough hands dragged her forward, and her father didn't stop them. Her brother didn't even raise his head. The street filled with whispers as townsfolk gathered at a distance, eyes wide but feet rooted. Mothers pulled their children behind them. Men chewed nervously at their tobacco, none willing to risk crossing the gang. Anna's voice broke as she begged, "Please, Pa, don't let them." But her plea ended in silence when her father turned his face away. The men laughed, hauling her past the saloon, past the church whose bell hung silent, and out toward the edge of town. Dust rose around her feet, the street echoing with her muffled sobs. High in the mountains beyond, far from town's reach, a man worked alone. Elias the trapper was checking his lines along the river. His beard was thick, his eyes sharp and weathered from years of solitude. The world of men and their debts had little claim on him now. Still, whispers of trouble traveled even to his quiet refuge. That morning, a trader passing through spoke of a girl taken to settle her father's ruin. A girl was dragged away by the Callahan gang. Elias said little to the trader, but the words settled deep, refusing to leave him. He had seen such bargains before, back when he lived closer to towns, when law bent under the weight of a pistol. He thought he had put that world behind him. Yet as the river gurgled at his feet and the sun dipped lower, his jaw tightened. Anna's name was unknown to him, her face a mystery. But injustice had a sound he recognized too well. Somewhere in the timberline a hawk cried, sharp and lonely. Elias stood still for a long while, then turned back toward his cabin. The decision weighed heavily but was certain. By dawn he would ride down. The town slept uneasily that night. Doors were bolted, shutters drawn tight. No one wanted to think too long on what had happened, because to think on it was to feel guilty. But guilt was a heavy thing, and most folks chose silence instead. Anna lay in the dark corner of a cabin that smelled of smoke, whiskey, and sweat. Her wrists were rubbed raw where the rope had cut into them. The Callahan gang had dumped her there like a sack of grain. She curled against the wall, shivering, though the night was warm. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father's face, silent, refusing to meet her gaze as he gave her away. The men laughed outside, voices thick with drink. Their boots crunched in the dirt, their threats drifting through the thin wood walls. She pressed her hands over her ears, but the noise still found her. She whispered a prayer she barely believed, her voice breaking in the dark. At the same time, Elias sat in his mountain cabin, awake while the fire burned low. His rifle leaned against the wall beside him, its metal glinting faintly in the glow. He sharpened a knife with slow, steady strokes. His movements were calm, but his mind was anything but. He remembered faces, other girls, other towns, taken, broken, forgotten. He had been younger then, powerless, and the memory had never left him. He thought he had built his solitude high enough to escape such things. But some wrongs carried a weight that echoed down the years. The knife edge caught the light, sharp as his resolve. By first light, his horse was saddled, his gear packed. He strapped on his rifle and slung a pouch across his shoulder. The air was cold at dawn, mist curling over the peaks. Elias mounted, the leather creaking, and nudged the horse down the rocky trail. Back in the gang's camp, the Callahans drank themselves loud and restless. Their leader, Boone Callahan, leaned on a post outside the cabin door. His scarred face was lit by the glow of a lantern. He chewed on a strip of jerky, spitting the gristle into the dirt. His men laughed, argued, and tossed dice on a barrel top. Boone's eyes kept drifting to the cabin, to the girl inside. "Debt's a fair trade," he muttered to himself, though even his tone carried a shadow of hunger. Anna huddled smaller against the wall. She could smell the smoke of their fire outside, the stench of unwashed bodies. Her heart raced at every burst of laughter, every bootstep that drew too close. She had no hope of escape, her wrists still bound, her body sore from being dragged. The night stretched slowly, each moment heavy as iron. She thought of the mountains, of stories told by traders, men who lived free, untouched by town greed or outlaw rule. Somewhere in that wild country, she wished there might be someone who cared enough to come, but wishing had never saved her before. By midday, Elias reached the valley floor. Dust trailed behind his horse as he rode past scattered ranches. Folks turned to look but said nothing, sensing his purpose in the set of his shoulders. He crossed the shallow creek, past the silent church, and finally saw the Callahan camp ahead. The gang hadn't noticed him yet. They were loud, careless in their victory. Boone leaned in close to the cabin door, his hand on the latch. Elias slowed his horse, eyes narrowing, his jaw like stone. His hand rested on the rifle at his side. The time for waiting had ended. Boone Callahan's hand pressed against the cabin door, the lantern glow catching the scar on his cheek. Inside, Anna froze, listening. Her breath came shallow, afraid of what came next. The men behind him roared with laughter, passing a bottle from hand to hand. Their voices blurred together, careless in their drunken haze. Then a sound cut through the noise. A horse's slow steps, hooves crunching steadily on gravel. Boone frowned and turned his head. The campfire lit the edge of a figure riding into view. A tall man, shoulders broad, rifle slung across his chest, eyes hard as flint. The laughter died down. The gang straightened, dice scattered, mugs set aside. One man called out, "What's this? Another fool comes wandering?" Elias swung down from his horse with calm, deliberate movement. Dust swirled around his boots as he tied the reins to a post. He didn't rush, didn't flinch. His silence carried more weight than shouting ever could. Boone stepped forward, narrowing his eyes. "Don't reckon I know you. What's your business here?" Elias's voice was low even. "The girl. She walks out of here free." The gang erupted in laughter, some bending double, others slapping their knees. Boone didn't laugh. He studied Elias, his jaw working. "You got a bold tongue, stranger. That debt's been paid. Ain't no business of yours." Elias met his gaze without a blink. "Then you've been paid in coin that's not yours to keep." His hand rested lightly on his rifle, not lifted, not aimed, but close enough. The air thickened. The gang's laughter faded, replaced by mutters and the shuffle of boots. Boone's smile curved, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You think you can ride down here alone, talk big, and walk away breathing?" "I didn't ride down here to talk," Elias said. For a moment, no one moved. Then a drunk at the back snorted and drew his pistol. Quick as a striking hawk, Elias's rifle lifted, the crack of the shot splitting the night. The drunk dropped, his weapon clattering in the dust. The camp erupted into chaos. Men scrambled for guns, curses flying. Anna pressed her hands over her ears, heart racing as shouts and gunfire filled the air. Through the thin wood she heard bodies fall, the sound of boots pounding and the sharp, relentless bark of Elias's rifle. Boone roared, drawing his revolver, firing back. Bullets tore splinters from posts and barrels, the lantern swinging wildly. Elias moved with cold precision, every shot counting. 2 more men dropped before Boone's revolver clicked empty. Breathing hard, Boone ducked behind a crate, fumbling to reload. His men lay scattered, groaning or still, the firelight casting twisted shadows over the dirt. Elias stepped closer, his boots steady, his rifle aimed. Boone's voice cracked through the chaos. "You don't even know her. She ain't worth dying for." Elias' eyes didn't waver. "She's worth killing for." With a final shot, Boone collapsed, his revolver slipping from his hand. The camp went still, the echoes of gunfire drifting into the night. Only the crackle of the fire and the ragged breath of the wounded remained. Elias lowered his rifle, the silence heavy around him. He pushed the cabin door open. Inside, Anna shrank back, her eyes wide with fear and disbelief. For a moment neither spoke. Then Elias said, quiet but firm, "You're free now." Anna stared at him, her wrists raw, her body trembling. She wanted to believe it, but her father's betrayal burned too fresh. Freedom was a word she'd never trusted, yet this man, this stranger with blood on his hands, stood as proof that not all men turned their backs. The lantern swung on its hook, casting long shadows across the cabin walls. Anna stayed pressed against the corner, her knees drawn tight. Elias stood in the doorway, the smell of gunpowder still clinging to him. For a moment neither of them moved. Finally he set his rifle against the wall and pulled a knife from his belt. Anna flinched, her breath catching. He paused, his eyes meeting hers, steady, calm, not cruel. Without a word he knelt and reached for her wrists. The blade slid clean through the ropes, her hands fell free. The skin beneath was red and swollen. She rubbed at them, her gaze flicking from the knife to his weathered face. Why did you do this?" Her voice cracked, weak from fear. Elias straightened, slipping the knife back into its sheath. "Because they had no right." That was all he said. Outside, the camp lay broken. The fire hissed low, bodies sprawled in the dirt. A horse whinnied, unsettled by the smell of blood. The night air was cooler now, stars sharp against the black sky. Anna stepped cautiously past Elias, her bare feet brushing against the floorboards. She froze when she saw the men outside. The sight made her stomach twist. So much violence, so much finality. She wanted to look away, but her eyes locked on her father's face in her memory, the way he had turned from her. The ache inside was sharper than the fear. Elias untied his horse and pulled the reins forward. "Can you ride?" he asked. She shook her head slowly. "I've never—" He studied her for a moment, then swung himself into the saddle. Extending a hand, he said, "Then you'll ride with me." She hesitated. Trust was something long lost to her, and this man was a stranger, carved from stone and silence. But the thought of staying in the camp was worse. Her hand trembled as she reached out. He pulled her up in front of him, settling her carefully against the saddle. The horse shifted, then carried them away from the camp. Anna leaned stiffly, afraid to touch him, afraid not to. The trail wound into the dark, the only sound the steady rhythm of hooves and the distant cry of coyotes. Elias spoke little. His eyes scanned the horizon, every sense alert. Anna, wrapped in exhaustion, let her head dip once, twice, until she finally leaned against his chest. He didn't move her away. By dawn, the mountains rose high and sharp against the pale sky. Mist lay thick in the valleys, the air cold enough to bite. Elias guided the horse upward, climbing the rocky paths with steady purpose. At last they reached a clearing where a small cabin stood among tall pines. Smoke drifted faintly from the chimney, a sign of life in the wilderness. Anna blinked at it, her eyes heavy with weariness. "This is your home?" Elias swung down and lifted her gently from the saddle. "It's shelter," he said. "Safer than town, safer than any road. You'll stay here?" She stood unsteady on her feet, clutching her arms around herself. "Why would you care what happens to me?" He looked at her long and silent before answering. Because no one else did. Anna lowered her eyes, the weight of his words pressing into her chest. She didn't trust him, not yet, but she couldn't deny the truth. For the first time, someone had chosen to stand for her. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and pine, the air cool after the long ride. Anna stepped inside, her bare feet brushing against a rough plank floor. The space was simple. One table, a few chairs, a stone hearth with glowing embers. Tools hung on the wall. Traps, ropes, knives, each worn from use. Elias moved quietly, setting his rifle by the door. He struck a match and coaxed a new flame to life in the hearth. Warmth spread slowly, chasing away the mountain chill. Anna stood near the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, unsure if she should step further in. "You can sit," Elias said without looking up. His voice was steady, not unkind, but there was no softness either. She lowered herself onto the edge of a chair, her body tense. Every creak of wood made her jump. Elias poured water from a jug into a tin cup and set it on the table in front of her. She stared at it, hesitated, then lifted it to her lips. The water was cold and it steadied her shaking hands. For a while, silence filled the cabin. Only the crackle of fire and the low whistle of wind outside could be heard. Anna wanted to speak, to ask what would happen now, but fear pressed the words back down. Finally, Elias broke the quiet. "Your wrists," he said, nodding. "Let me see." She pulled her hands back against her chest. "I'm fine." His brow furrowed, but he didn't press her. Instead, he set a small tin of salve on the table. "Use it when you're ready. It'll heal faster." Anna stared at the tin, then at him. He wasn't asking anything of her, not demanding, not cruel. Just leaving the choice. That confused her more than threats would have. As the morning wore on, Elias busied himself, splitting wood, checking snares, mending gear. He moved with the rhythm of a man who needed no one else. Anna watched, uncertain where she fit in this wilderness life. By midday, her stomach growled. She tried to hide it, but Elias glanced her way. Without a word, he cooked over the hearth. Beans, dried meat, bread he'd baked days before. He set a plate in front of her and stepped back, taking his own seat near the fire. She ate slowly, the food plain but filling. Each bite felt heavy, like a reminder that she was still alive, though she wasn't sure what for. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. "You killed them. All of them." Elias' gaze flicked up. "They would have done worse." Her hands tightened around the cup. "But you didn't know me." "I didn't need to," he said simply. The fire popped. Anna looked down, her chest aching. No one had ever spoken like that about her. Like her worth didn't need proof. Like she mattered just because she was alive. Later, Elias showed her a corner of the cabin where a small bed stood, covered in furs. "Rest, you've ridden far." She touched the blanket, soft against her sore hands. The kindness unsettled her, yet it also eased some part of her fear. She lay down, curling on her side, the warmth of the fire reaching her even there. Elias stayed awake, sharpening tools, checking his traps once more. His eyes often flicked to the window, watching the line of trees. Trouble wasn't done. He knew the Callahans had kin, and vengeance was a fire that spread fast. As night fell, Anna stirred in her sleep, whispering words he couldn't catch. Elias sat still, listening to the wind outside, his rifle close by. In the quiet of the mountains, he made himself a silent promise. No harm would touch her again, not while he drew breath. The next morning, mist clung to the trees, wrapping the mountains in a pale shroud. Anna woke slowly, the smell of smoke and pine filling her lungs. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then the memory struck. The cabin, the stranger, the gunfire. She sat up quickly, her heart thudding. Elias was already outside. Through the small window she saw him chopping wood, each swing of the axe sharp and steady. His movements were sure, his frame built by years of work. She watched a moment, unsure what to make of him. He had spilled blood for her, yet he spoke so little, gave so little away. She stood wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. Her wrists still ached, but the salve had soothed them somewhat. On the table, she found a bowl of porridge left waiting. Steam rose faintly from it. He had thought of her before the day began. Anna ate slowly, her thoughts tangled. Fear still clung to her, but beneath it was a strange calm she hadn't felt in years. No shouts, no debts, no drunken threats, only the sound of the axe and the call of birds. When Elias returned, he carried the wood inside and stacked it near the hearth. He gave her a brief nod but said nothing. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she asked the only thing she could. "What will happen now?" He set the axe aside, wiping his hands. "Now you learn to live. Out here, that's the only way," she frowned. "Live? I don't know how." Elias looked at her, his eyes steady. "Then I'll teach you." And so the days began. He showed her how to fetch water from the stream, how to set snares for rabbits, and how to carry wood without stumbling on the uneven ground. At first she resisted, her steps clumsy, her hands soft from a life that had never prepared her for wilderness. But Elias never mocked her, never raised his voice. His silence was heavy, yet it gave her space to try and fail without shame. One evening he placed a bow in her hands. "Pull strong," he said, guiding her arms. She tried, the string biting into her fingers. The arrow fell short. She bit her lip, embarrassed, but Elias only retrieved it and set it again. Once more. She tried again and again until at last the arrow flew true, striking the stump he had set for her. A small thrill sparked in her chest. For the first time in a long while she felt capable. Still not all was peace. At night she woke from dreams of the gang's laughter, of her father's silence. Sometimes she cried into the blanket, hoping Elias wouldn't hear, but he always seemed to know. He never asked, never pried, but in the morning, she'd find some small thing, an extra piece of bread, a shawl he had left by the fire, a silence that gave her room to breathe. One afternoon, as they worked near the stream, Anna asked, "Why do you live up here so far from everyone?" Elias was quiet for a long while, the water rushing past them. "Because men down there take more than they give, so," he said at last. "Up here the land is hard, but it's honest." Anna turned that over in her mind. She thought of her father's broken promises, her brother's bowed head. The land at least didn't lie. But as they returned to the cabin, a crow's cry echoed through the valley. Elias stopped, his hand tightening on the rifle at his shoulder. His eyes swept the ridge above. Anna felt her chest tighten. The Callahans were not gone. Vengeance was waiting, and soon it would come down from the hills. The air in the mountains grew heavier in the days that followed. Even when the sun was warm, Anna felt a chill beneath her skin. She noticed how often Elias stopped mid-step, his head turning to the ridges, his eyes narrowing at the tree line. He was listening for something she could not hear. One night, while Anna sat by the fire mending a tear in her dress, Elias cleaned his rifle for the third time that week. The sound of the metal parts clicking together filled the silence. Finally she asked, "They're coming, aren't they?" He looked at her for a moment, then gave a small nod. Blood calls to blood. Boone's kin won't let this lie. Her hand stilled on the fabric. She wanted to ask what would happen when they came, but the answer already lived in Elias's eyes. The next morning, he set her to work carrying stones from the stream. Together they built a wall around the cabin's small garden. Not high, not thick, but something. Then he showed her where he kept extra rifles, where the powder and shot were stored. "You think they'll find us here?" she asked. "They'll try," he said. His voice carried no fear, only certainty. At first the thought terrified her, but as the days passed, something shifted inside her. Instead of running from the fear, she began to face it. Elias trained her with steady patience. She learned how to reload quickly, how to aim with both hands steady, and how to breathe before pulling the trigger. The first time she struck the stump dead center, Elias gave a small nod. He said nothing more, but the pride in his eyes was plain. At night, Anna often sat outside staring at the stars. She thought of the life she had known. Dusty streets, the sound of debt collectors pounding on the door, Her father's excuses, her brother's silence. That world had abandoned her, but here in this harsh land she was learning strength she never thought she had. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks, Elias returned from checking his traps. His shirt was torn and blood stained the sleeve. Anna rushed to him, panic rising. "What happened?" "Riders," he said simply, lowering himself into a chair. "Two of them, scouting, they won't ride back." Anna's breath caught. She pressed a cloth to his arm, hands trembling. "Then they know where we are." Elias met her gaze, his voice low but steady. "Then we'll be ready." The days grew tense, each sound in the forest sharper than before. Anna kept the rifle close, practicing until her shoulder ached. Elias worked from dawn till dusk, reinforcing the cabin, cutting more wood and storing more food. His silence grew heavier, but she understood now. It was not coldness, but focus. One night she finally asked, "Why do you fight for me? You could have left me there. You don't owe me anything." Elias sat by the fire, the flames flickering over his weathered face. "I don't fight because I owe," he said. "I fight because it's right." His words struck something deep in her. For so long she had been treated as a burden, a weight, something to be given away to settle a debt. Now here was a man who saw her not as a cost, but as worth defending. Anna lay awake long after he had gone quiet, staring at the ceiling beams. The fear of what was coming still gnawed at her, but beneath it another feeling stirred. Something steady, something like hope. In the distance, a wolf howled. Elias rose, checking the rifle once more. He stood at the window, eyes scanning the dark ridge. The Callahans would come soon, and when they did, blood would mark the mountain again. The first snow dusted the mountain peaks when the riders came. Anna saw them from the ridge as the sun broke over the valley. Dark shapes moving slowly and steadily, their horses kicking up clouds of frost. She counted 5, maybe 6. More would follow. Her breath caught in her chest. She turned to Elias, who stood beside her with his spyglass. His jaw was tight, his face unreadable. "They found us," she whispered. He lowered the glass, slipping it into his coat. It was only a matter of time. Back at the cabin, they made ready. Elias checked the rifles again, laid powder and shot within easy reach, and filled the water bucket by the door. Anna gathered wood for the fire, her hands shaking as she stacked it. She wanted to run, to hide in the trees, but she forced herself to stay. Elias looked at her. "If the cabin falls, we take to the rocks. Stay close. Do as I say." Anna nodded, though fear churned in her stomach. She remembered the men's laughter, the ropes on her wrists. She would not go back. Not ever. By afternoon, the riders drew near. Their voices carried on the cold air, jeering, mocking. The Callahans had come for vengeance, their kin lying in the dirt because of Elias. One called out, "Trapper, you thought you could take boon from us and live? We'll burn your cabin, bury you in your own walls." Elias didn't answer. He stood in the doorway, rifle steady, eyes cold. His silence was answer enough. The gang spread out, circling the clearing. Guns glinted in the weak sun. Anna's breath came fast. She gripped the rifle Elias had given her, the wood rough against her palms. Then it began. A shot cracked, splintering wood from the cabin wall. Elias fired back, dropping the man who'd pulled the trigger. Chaos exploded. Gunfire echoing sharply through the valley, horses screaming, men shouting. Anna ducked, heart pounding, ears ringing. Elias moved like a stone come alive, reloading smoothly, firing without waste. Every shot he took found its mark. Still the gang pressed hard, bullets thudding into the cabin, glass shattering from the small window. "Anna," he shouted, tossing her a pouch of cartridges. She scrambled, hands fumbling, feeding them into his grip. Her fear burned into something fiercer. She would not be useless again. Another shot shattered the doorframe. Anna flinched, then lifted her rifle just as Elias had taught her. She steadied her breath, aimed at the shadow of a man darting for cover, and fired. The figure dropped, his pistol spinning into the snow. Her hands shook, but she had done it. Elias glanced at her, gave the smallest nod. No words, just recognition. The fight raged on. Smoke filled the air, the smell of powder biting at her throat. The cabin walls shook with each impact. Anna's ears rang with the clash of it, but through the fear something hardened inside her. She wasn't the girl begging her father anymore. She wasn't a debt to be traded. She was fighting. As the sun dipped lower, 3 of the gang lay dead in the snow. 2 more crawled back to the trees, their shouts ragged with anger. Elias stepped outside, rifle raised. The last man fired wild, missed, and Elias's shot cut him down. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of fire and the caw of distant crows. Smoke drifted over the clearing. Anna lowered her rifle, her arms weak, her knees threatening to give. Elias stood still, scanning the ridge, ready for more. Slowly he lowered his weapon. The siege had ended, for now. Anna stepped into the snow, her breath clouding in the cold air. Her hand still trembled, but her voice was steady when she said, "I fought." Elias looked at her, his eyes softening for the first time. "You did." The snow in the clearing was trampled and stained, silence heavy after the storm of gunfire. Anna's breath came in clouds, her chest aching from the weight of what she had done. She still felt the kick of the rifle in her shoulder, still saw the man falling in the snow. Inside the cabin, Elias moved with calm purpose, reloading each rifle, setting them in their places once more. His face gave nothing away, but his shoulders carried the weariness of a man who had fought too many battles. Anna stood in the doorway, her hands raw, her dress torn. "Will they send more?" she asked, her voice quiet. Elias paused, then nodded once. "They will." Boone's kin ran deep, but tonight they'll be licking their wounds. She sank into a chair by the fire, her legs heavy. For the first time she realized how close she had come to dying. Yet another thought burned stronger. How close she had come to living a different kind of death in the hands of those men. Elias set a pot over the fire, pouring water into it. "Eat, rest. Tomorrow we'll set the traps wider. They'll try to circle us." Anna stared into the flames. "I don't want to hide," she said softly. Elias looked at her, his eyes steady. "You don't have to. You stood today. That's more than most ever do." Her throat tightened. She thought of her father, his silence, his turned back. She thought of Elias standing in front of her, fighting with every breath. The difference was carved deep in her heart. That night the wind howled through the trees. Anna lay awake, the crackle of the fire in her ears. She turned the ring of rope scars on her wrists, feeling how far she had come in so short a time. She whispered into the dark, not sure if Elias heard, "I won't be given away again." Elias didn't answer, but she felt his presence close, steady as stone. Days passed, the snow deepening. The Callahans did not return, though signs of riders showed on the ridges, hoofprints in the fresh drifts, smoke from far-off camps. Each day was borrowed time, but Anna used it. She learned more of the land, more of survival. Elias showed her how to snare fish beneath the ice, how to track deer by the faintest print. She grew stronger. Her steps were surer, her eyes sharper. The girl dragged from town was fading, and in her place stood someone new, still afraid at times, but no longer powerless. One evening, as the sky flamed red behind the peaks, Elias brought out a small pouch. From it, he drew a ring, simple silver, worn smooth with age. He held it in his calloused hand for a long while before speaking. "This was my mother's," he said at last, his voice low. "She gave it to me when I was young, told me to carry it until I found a woman worth giving it to." Anna's breath caught. She looked from the ring to him, her heart racing. "Why show me this?" Elias met her eyes. "Because you deserve a choice. To be wanted, not taken. To choose a life, not be forced into one." Her hands trembled as he placed the ring before her on the table. No demand, no binding words, only an offering. Anna stared at it, tears stinging her eyes. For so long she had been traded like a coin, her worth decided by others. Now for the first time someone placed the choice in her hands. The firelight flickered, the ring shining softly. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You're giving me freedom." Elias nodded once. "That's all I have to give." Anna sat in silence, the ring gleaming in the firelight. Her heart pounded, caught between fear and hope. For the first time, no one was forcing her hand. The weight of the choice was hers alone. Her fingers reached out slowly, brushing the cool silver. She thought of her father, who had sold her without hesitation. She thought of the gang, who had seen her as a prize to be claimed. And she thought of Elias, who had bled and fought not to own her, but to give her back to herself. Her eyes lifted to him. He sat still, watching her with the quiet patience of a man who had learned to let the world move at its own pace. There was no pressure in his gaze, only the steady promise that he would remain whatever her answer. Anna swallowed, the lump in her throat aching. "You've given me more than freedom," she whispered. "You've given me a place I can belong." She picked up the ring, holding it in trembling fingers. For a long moment she studied it, the way the firelight caught its edges. Then with a deep breath she slid it onto her finger. The fit was imperfect, but the meaning was not. Elias's face softened, the faintest smile breaking through his usual reserve. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers, rough and warm. No words were needed. The bond between them was sealed, not in chains or fear, but in choice and trust. The days that followed were still hard. The mountains demanded strength, and the memory of the Callahans lingered like smoke on the wind. But Anna no longer faced each day as a prisoner of fate. She worked beside Elias, not beneath him. She walked the ridges, not as a girl discarded, but as a woman reborn. In the town below, whispers spread of the mountain man who had spilled blood for the sake of a woman. Some called it madness, others called it love. But to Anna it was neither. It was a promise kept. A vow lived out in every small act, firewood chopped, snares set, a roof repaired before the snows returned. One evening, as spring began to touch the valley, Elias led her to a ridge where wild roses grew between the rocks. The wind carried the scent of new life, and the sky burned gold with the setting sun. Anna stood there, her hand in his, and for the first time since her childhood she felt peace. She pressed her fingers to the ring, smiling softly. It was not wealth nor power, but something far greater, a symbol that she was no longer a burden, no longer a debt to be paid. She was a wife by her own choosing and a partner in the life they were building. Elias looked out across the horizon, then down at her. "The world will still test us," he said quietly. Anna nodded. "Let it try. We'll stand together." And so they did. The debt that had once bound her was gone, buried with those who had sought to own her. In its place stood a new life carved into the mountains, rooted in freedom, trust, and love. Anna had been sold like a thing. But in the end she was chosen. And more importantly, she had chosen too. The mountain man had paid in blood, but he had also offered her something far stronger. A simple ring, a vow, a home. If you enjoyed this tale of love and survival on the frontier, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Shadow Frontier Tales for more Wild West stories. Share it with a friend who loves frontier romance, and let me know in the comments what part of Anna and Elias's journey spoke to you most.